On our last guest for tonight, my super buddy and amazing mom and holistic pediatrician extraordinaire, the creator of the Everyday Pediatrics program, Dr. Elisa Song. And I think I just need to unmute you. And Elisa, whoop, there we
All right,
go.
can you hear me now?
We can,
Okay,
yay.
great.
Hi. I'm so glad
Hello.
you're able to join us and everybody's kind of getting back on the healthy track tonight after
Yes, for
the,
sure.
oh my
Yep.
goodness.
Yeah, and it was so great to hear Dr. Nicole and Dr. Roseanne, and I did not make it last night, so I need to hear the replay because I want to hear what Katie had to say last night, and of course Terry and Cynthia. So thanks for doing
Yeah.
this. This is awesome.
Oh, it's so fun. Thanks for being here. And I mean, it's amazing. As soon as you hop on, everybody's so excited to see you. And I know there's been so much love coming to your family with what you've been going through. So why don't you catch us up on things and tell us what this COVID-19 thing means to you?
Well, I thought that I needed to share my story on Facebook and Instagram this morning. I actually wasn't going to, and I thought, you know what, I'm sure it's going to come up tonight.
Right?
So, just to, give everyone a little heads up. But, my kids were diagnosed with COVID-19, and, Kenzie has a positive swab, Bodhi negative swab. His antibody tests are pending. But I just posted, if you go to my Facebook or Instagram page, I just posted, I'm going to start doing a series of, COVID-19 lessons learned, with all the things I've learned, not just with the research before the kids got it, but, since then.
Mm-hmm.
And one of the things that is startling, I don't know where you want to start with all this, but, with
Dive
that is
right in.
startling is, really, I knew about the potential for false negatives, but the number of false negatives with the PCR swab testing is astounding. And I think that,
Uh-huh.
we really, as citizens of this country, as healthcare providers, we need to really raise our voices and urge the administration and our higher ups in healthcare to make the testing more widely available so we know what's accurate. We need accurate tests. We don't just need numbers anymore. Before I was calling for get more people tested. It's not that simple because we're finding that in the first week of symptoms, maybe 1 in 3 people who are tested who actually have COVID may actually have a false negative test. And then by the second week, that number, maybe 1 in 2 people who actually have COVID test negative. And so we can't base our decisions, on this. And I think the fear in all of this is because we just don't know, right? There's so much unknown. Thankfully, Kenzie and Bodhi, they are doing amazingly well. They have
I
bounced back.
love the
They're
bacon
back to
picture.
yeah, they're back to their amazing, bouncy selves. But Bodhi I did take him to the hospital for oxygen, and for 2 days, actually 1.5 days. I mean, it was very quick, and he literally bounced back overnight. And I can share what I think is the reason. But we need more data. We need accurate testing. We need more information on what therapeutics
Right.
might be helpful. There's we can't get rid of this fear if we don't have information. So that's what I'm hoping to share with people.
Yeah, and just some numbers, I think, because it's really important. It's like, I think it's important to talk about numbers because when we get some of the original work out of China, we're looking at if you do like if you're taking a sample from deep in the lungs, you have like a 93% accuracy. And
Yeah.
if you cough up a loogie, you've got like 72%. But the nasal swabs that we're doing, 63%, and the throat swabs were 32% accurate.
Well, and that's if you do it correctly, right? Because
Correct.
what they're now recommending, and what they did for Bodhi, was a combined oropharyngeal and nasopharyngeal swab. I mean, it sounds kind of gross,
Absolutely.
but first they try to get you to cough, right? Because you're trying to get some of that spit or sputum up from your lungs,
From the
and
lower
then
lungs, yeah.
before you swallow, they do the swab swirling around for 10 seconds. And then they take that swab and put it way back deep into your nasal passages where your nose hits the top of your throat, right? Your nasopharynx, and have to swirl that around for 10 seconds. And I mean, if you've tried to do a swab on yourself, I mean, I know I've done swabs on myself. That's 20 seconds of gagging and, feeling like you have to sneeze and, feeling like, oh my gosh, is this thing going to go up into my brain? And so the collection, right? The collection methodology is very likely not accurate most of the time.
Right.
So we have the collection, inaccuracies, and then we actually have the reagent testing inaccuracies.
Well,
and
so
Diane just wrote about the blood test. The antibody test may be rolling out, but again, we don't know if these blood tests are going to be accurate because, what we don't have the studies on is when we look at IgM antibodies, which test for acute or active infection. So most infections, they'll have, you will initially mount an immune response and produce IgM antibodies. So those antibodies go up, and then after a period of time, they go down. And then at some point during your illness, your IgG antibodies go up, and those are what we call our memory antibodies. So they go up and they stay elevated. The problem with COVID-19 is we have no idea exactly when IgM antibodies go up, when IgM antibodies go down, when IgG antibodies go up, and how long they stay elevated for.
Right. And
so,
like,
and Darren, right? Darren Ingalls, Dr. Ingalls will be on tomorrow, and he said, yes, it takes months to validate any test. So we can't rely on that either.
yeah, and so like some of the tests, and we have to remember here, this is a really important point. The FDA sort of loosened their strict criteria for your PCR testing as well as your antibody testing because of the emergency. But we have tech companies that are specializing in nothing close to infectious diseases, rolling out infectious disease testing. And I'm like, and it's concerning. And, to correct a little of what was said earlier, not by, in one of the comments is there's only one FDA approved test, right, from Celex. And we don't even know what that means because the testing that they use is not a standard antibody test. Mm-hmm. So the problem is we are moving things too quickly. So, but what did it feel like? I mean, because like, I mean, we could talk for, between you, I, and Darren, we could be on all night talking about, vaccine and, rolling it out too quickly, testing and rolling it out too quickly. But as a mom who's got your background with your kid having to go through these 20 seconds of swabbing minimum, knowing that it's try number 4 and it might not still work. I mean, what's it felt like as your family? I mean,
well, so when, and I will say most people don't have the option even to do the nasal swabs, right? Mm-hmm. Even, here in the Bay Area, even still, if you don't meet the criteria, high fever, shortness of breath, cough, you're not going to get tested necessarily at the centers. So, I, in my office, have some swabs available, and I'm not really able to swab patients because I don't have personal protective equipment to keep me or my staff safe, right? And so we've had these swabs. So, I thought, well, I'll do them on Kenzie, when she started getting sick, and her first swab was negative. So I thought, oh, great. Because when I told her, I think she might have COVID-19, because we'd been in quarantine for 3 weeks, right? Shelter at home for 3 weeks, and she hadn't had a single exposure to any outside person. So, it was just so strange. And when I told her I thought it could be COVID-19 and she needs to stay in her room, away from all of us until we know for sure. I mean, the tears and just, it broke my heart to tell her that. And, we didn't do that. I said, look, okay, you can be around, but just cover your cough and we'll just have you sit away at dinner. But, I just, as a mom, could not keep her isolated in her room and not be with her, when she's feeling awful. And so then the test came back negative, and we thought, great, right? But then her fever lasted for 8 days, and her cough lasted for a full 16 days, right? Which is not typical for a common cold. It's not even usual for a flu. And so I immediately thought, okay, that's a false negative. And so, but, for the most part, she was acting fine. She was energetic. We were going for walks. She was winded more easily. She would cough a lot more, but I really wasn't that worried about her. And, I upped to some of the vitamins we were doing already. So upped her zinc, upped her C, upped her quercetin, gave her a lot of glutathione and Epsom salt baths. And she seemed like she was managing fine. It wasn't until Bodhi started to get sick, he developed a fever, and really bad stomach ache. So for him, his hallmark symptom, his primary symptom was stomach ache. And throughout his entire illness, he complained of stomach ache and headaches. He never complained about shortness of breath, and his cough was not that severe. One tip-off that I knew Kenzie very likely COVID-19 was, I'm not suggesting that people run out and get a pulse oximeter, but I, as a pediatrician, right,
Happen to
have the
have one at home
luxury
like
of,
I
I
do.
have one in my office. So I brought it home, and one time I thought, let me just check. And she was surprisingly, her oxygen saturation was 91%, 92% on room air, which is lower than normal. It's not expected. And we're hearing about these patients presenting in the ERs with COVID-19 who don't look to be in very significant distress, but their oxygen levels are very low. And so, then I knew. I mean, that's when I knew in my heart. And then when Bodhi started to get sick, he had a fever and stomach ache and headache. And we know that there are a good number of people presenting with abdominal pain, with COVID-19. But what made me be anxious about him was reading the reports that people who present with the abdominal GI symptoms seem like they have worse outcomes. So immediately, right, too much information, right? I mean, this is just, we're being on media, looking at the news, reading too much was fueling my anxiety, right? And so I sent a swab again, for him and for Kenzie. I just decided to send it again, and hers came back positive. Bodhi's came back negative, but
Wow.
I knew. And that night, so what's interesting, that night, the first night of his fever, he had the most scary visual and auditory hallucinations. He kept saying he was hearing all of these mean voices saying really bad words. He has a wall in front of him that has mirrored stars on it. He said he kept seeing the wall moving closer and further. And yes, fever can give hallucinations, but he's had fevers before and that's never happened. And as I posted this on Instagram and Facebook, I had so many parents direct messaging me saying that their kids out of the blue also had similar, no upper respiratory symptoms, but fever and hallucinations. And could that be it? And I don't know. The neurologist at UCSF, she said she's had two other kids, one kid in particular who presented last month with these auditory and visual hallucinations and fever, and they did a COVID swab, which was negative. But now in retrospect, hearing Bodhi's case, and because he's so suspiciously had COVID-19, all the doctors in the hospital did not believe his negative test and sent out antibody tests. So they're gonna, do antibody tests on this other kid. But I'm really praying that antibody tests are accurate. So we'll just have to see, right?
Yeah, so there's a couple questions about the testing, and I just want to just hit on them because there's something super important, I think, to talk about. Is the testing that's being done in South Korea is very similar to what we're doing. Tons of different companies are using the same technology. But the thing is, every test is different. Somebody asked about hygienics. I happen to speak to the lab director, and I know what they're doing to validate it. But again, it's just like we need to. It's not just that is one company making a really good test. It's the question of whether the testing itself is good. And I think some of the scariness is we're keeping our tests for the sickest people, so we don't know what the other symptoms are, right?
Yes.
And so now one of the things is and I know that you wrote about this on your blog, but about ACE2 receptors and everything in the lungs and the type 2, in the alveoli and everything in the epithelial cells. But one of the other places in the body where ACE2 receptors are so high are in the enterocytes, so in the cells
in
of
the
the
gut
wall. And so I've heard this similar things, and I've been wondering, is that part of it? Are we, because we're so intense on testing the people in the critical care unit, in the ER, that we're missing how other people are presenting because it's a selection bias. We're so narrow.
Yeah. And then for those people who are presenting with the GI symptoms, it may make more sense to do stool testing, right? Fecal testing. So who knows? But, I'm really glad you brought up the ACE2 point, because you brought that up with Dr. Roseanne. And, there's been all of this speculation that vitamin D supplements should not be used because vitamin D can increase ACE2 receptors. But, I had such fears when that was spreading around that people then would not, would have would lower their likely already low, vitamin D levels by not taking any vitamin D
Right.
supplements. And, while we really don't know for sure how to treat COVID-19, even we have 4 months of experience, since
Right.
it was described in China, and we still don't know. But we do know, but there is some evidence, as Dr. Tom pointed out, that perhaps, ACE2 medications, things that enhance ACE2, serum H2, right? Not ACE2 receptors on the cells, but serum ACE2 may actually be beneficial. And so, the speculation was that vitamin D, increases ACE2 and maybe may make COVID-19 worse. But we know that vitamin D can actually reduce your risk of sepsis and is so important for a healthy immune response.
Yeah. Well, the other thing too is I was reading some papers, even some that came out in the last couple of days about vitamin D levels being even more strongly linked to decreasing viral replication rates and decreasing inflammation than I had
Yeah.
previously thought. But there's this conversation about showing that in lab studies for SARS-CoV-1, the original sort of SARS back in 2003, and even
Yeah.
in MERS, that if we increase our serum ACE2 levels, will dramatically reduce the severity of the pneumonia. And
Yeah.
then people have been talking about ACE2 exhaustion, meaning we've sort of got, when we go from sort of what people are calling like, stage 1 to stage 2 and having it, just overwhelming the body going into this more critical state, when you get to where you need to go to the hospital, I mean, have you been reading about that, or what's your feeling about? Because it seemed, yeah, it's such a
Yeah.
hard thing to
I mean,
answer.
it's so hard to know because we get, with all the information that's coming out, I mean, most of what we're reading about is theoretical, right? And so, I mean, it's really hard to know. And I think we just have to use our common sense and not go overboard on anything, right? And take everything, with just an eye towards, well, what are we seeing? We need to get this information out to people who are in the hospitals, in the front lines, and we need to start keeping data, right? We need to start keeping
Yeah.
track because we need this information. I know there's some questions on, how
Treatment.
on earth do I think that the kids got it? I mean, one thing that the ID doctors at UCSF, what we're speculating is, about a month ago. So it was March 13 was when our schools announced that we would not be returning to school. At that point, it's for a couple of weeks. It was until April 7. And so, Peter, on a couple of days before that day, he developed, this really strange GI symptoms. He had loose stools and a really bad headache. And he did as usual, our normal kind of dosing regimen that we do with our supplements, and he got better in a couple of days. Now, I then developed this intense headache, and I never get headaches.
Right.
So, this intense headache where I actually, was thinking, I mean, I don't usually take ibuprofen or Tylenol. I was thinking, should I do it? Because my head was just pounding, sore throat. I felt, really terrible. I was convinced I had a fever, but every time I checked, I didn't. And then it went away after 4 days. So we're thinking that perhaps Peter and I actually had it and, then incubated, and Kenzie's timeline would fit with that, kind of, 2 to 14 day incubation period that we're presuming with COVID-19. So I don't know. I mean, as soon as accurate antibody tests are available, I'm certainly going to be checking.
Right.
One thing that I do want to really also make sure people understand is, with all of the different supplements that are being recommended, I mean, high dose vitamin C, nebulized glutathione, hydroxychloroquine, azithromycin. I mean,
Quercetin, zinc. Yep.
yeah, I mean, we just don't know. I do believe, because even Bodhi, who, we brought to the hospital, and he, needed oxygen for about a day and a half. I mean, his turnaround was so remarkable. And let me tell you, okay, do as I say, not as I do, right? I mean, as a doctor, I had the pulse ox, right? So I could monitor his oxygen saturations, right? I had all the knowledge and, of not just Dr. Google, but all the research I've been doing. So that was also, you can drive yourself crazy with too much information. And, I, at home, when Bodhi's oxygen levels start to drop, I mean, I actually ordered some home oxygen. Why? Because I can, right? I mean,
My
don't do
God.
this, right? But I did, because I thought, well, he doesn't look like he's in distress. I'm just treating his numbers, and I just want to, help him get a little rest, right? And in the meantime, I'm calling my doctor friends, and I'm talking to my sister, who's a doctor in New Jersey, and they're right in the thick of things. And I find, and his oxygen saturation was 88%, 89%. And I brought him to the ER, and we hospitalized him. I mean, literally within hours of being in the hospital, not hours, I would say overnight. That first night, they did nothing but give him the same oxygen I was doing, but he turned around. I mean, his oxygen, he dropped from 2 liters to half a liter. And I'm going to tell you, what I think really made the biggest difference was not any of the supplements that I gave him at that moment, although I will tell you 2 supplements that I added that I do think helped. But, it was the fear, right? The fear that was lifted off of me, right? That he was going to crash on day 8 or 9, like we read about in the papers, right? Because he was at day 8, right? The fear that I was, going to bring him and he was going to have this horrible outcome, the fear that the kids would never see each other again. I mean, just this overwhelming fear, right? And when I got there and someone else could monitor him, I just felt this, wave of relief that, that
Yeah.
someone else was watching him, that he would be okay, that he would have the help he needed. And that reduced his anxiety so significantly. And I could see it, right? Because when I would start to get worked up and anxious, he immediately would get anxious, and I could watch his oxygen saturations drop 3, 4 points. When
Right.
we could sit together, do our diaphragmatic breathing, open up the app, Stop, Breathe, Think is the app that we use, and do square breathing. We repeated our healing mantras. We repeated, my body is strong, my lungs are strong, I'm getting better and better every day. And literally within a minute, we would see his oxygen levels rise and go up 4 points in that minute. So we cannot, I mean, Dr. Roseanne and Dr. Nicole have spoken about, the importance of mindfulness and meditation. It's not just to be relaxed. It really is to help our lungs open up, to reduce inflammation, and to get us better faster. And my heart goes out to the adults who are not able to have a friend or a family member with them, who are suffering with anxiety on their own. I'm sure that's making things worse for them. And so, if we can even, no matter what we do to stay connected is so important. But I think that was probably the number one thing that really helped Bodhi turn around
Right.
so quickly, because there's no explanation for why he turned around that quickly. The other 2 things that I did, I started him on melatonin that night because I wanted him to get a good night's sleep. And I started something called SPM Active, which I know we've spoken about for our kids with PANS and PANDAS, but there's some questions on what might be helpful for our kids with PANS and PANDAS. But SPM is something called Specialized Pro-Resolving Mediators. Again, I do not want you running out and getting this. This is all speculative, but we know that SPMs are natural substances in our bodies, produced by our immune system, that help modulate and regulate inflammation. And so inflammation initially when our kids are sick is not a bad thing. Inflammation when we're sick, the fever, the body aches, the sore throat, those are ways that our immune system is trying to fight the infection, right, to deal with it. But at a certain point in COVID-19, for some people, that inflammation goes unchecked and not regulated. And so we want to figure out ways that we can regulate and normalize that immune response. When inflammation's done its job, how do we reduce inflammation? How do we maintain the homeostasis, the equilibrium, so we don't get that cytokine storm, right?
Well,
And specialized pro-resolving mediators theoretically can do that. And so for my PANS patients, that is something that I talk about with them.
Right. Now, guys, there's so many questions about what we should do in specific situations, and these are all super important, but a lot of the questions about the supplements, I want to refer you guys to, and I'll make sure that I grab the link from you, Elisa, but you have an amazing handout on how to get all of these supplements from food, like basically these micronutrients
Yes,
from real
yes,
food, because
absolutely.
it's very hard to OD on food, and you can
Yes.
do it here. The things are like, we can rattle off all kinds of cool sounding stuff like melatonin and nitric oxide, which you can change with breathing, and beets, and vitamin C, ascorbic acid, to decrease inflammasomes, and all this other stuff. But the
Yeah,
bottom line is these are all things that come out of food, right? And I think
so
it's,
true.
yeah, and your handout is so good. So we'll make sure that we send that out with the replay, the link to get that. It's so critical.
This is really critical, guys. Listening, I mean, food really is medicine. And, despite our best efforts, sometimes it won't be enough. But it lays the groundwork for really, if you do get sick, because really and truly, and I don't say this to scare people, but estimates are that by the time this whole thing is over, up to 70% of us may have contracted COVID-19,
Which is
right?
like the flu, right? That's
Yeah.
okay.
So we want to be so resilient and strong in our immune system that even if we do get it, we will go through with minimal complications, right? That is the goal. And having that foundation of food, learning to cook with your kids, and teaching them this is where the opportunity comes in that Dr. Nicole mentioned, teaching them, well, why are we having this kale tonight? It has so much glutathione in it that's going to help support our immune systems. So, this is where we have the opportunity to teach kids, not just, why, not just to say, oh, eat our healthy foods to keep our immune systems healthy, but why are we choosing certain foods and the power of nutrients? Really important. The other thing I want to mention, Dr. Roseanne put in the link for the blog post.
Thanks, Roseanne.
Because the nutrients that I mentioned that I do believe are so important right now are quercetin, vitamin C, glutathione, vitamin D, probiotics, and omega-3 essential fatty acids. And these are all things we can get from food. So please remember that. And I just highly had a question about, did you give ibuprofen or Tylenol for fever reduction? And I do want to actually point that out too.
That's where I'm going too. That's a big
Yeah.
one.
Because when I was in the ER and they're asking me about Bodhi's fever, and I told them, well, it was just low grade for the past few days, and they asked, well, was that on Tylenol or ibuprofen? And I said, well, I haven't actually given him any fever reducers, period, like this whole time, right? Even Kenzie, when she was 103.1 that first night, I didn't give any fever reducers, right? I didn't give Tylenol or Motrin. And in the when we got to the hospital room, the nurse, there was a standing order to give Bodhi Tylenol, because his temperature at that point was, I mean, it wasn't even very high. I think it was 99.8. And I said, well, can I actually decline that? Knowing that I could, right? But I just wanted, I said, well,
Nice.
I actually don't think he needs it because he's comfortable right now and the fever doesn't seem to be bothering him. And she kind of looked shocked and she said, okay, you really don't want it? And I'm like, no, I don't think so. I'll ask for it later if I do.
Right.
But I mean, the fever, again, we have to remember fever is our body's natural response to fighting infections and fighting, injury. And, fever phobia is rampant. And there are some studies showing that if we artificially reduce fevers, especially with something like acetaminophen or Tylenol, which also depletes glutathione, that may actually prolong the duration of your illness. And they found, with the flu, that it can prolong the duration of shedding of the flu virus from your nose. So what does that mean? I mean, you feel sicker for longer and you're actually contagious for longer. Now, we don't have that same evidence with COVID-19, but
what we,
you know,
it's interesting. I want to interject something because it goes back to what you're saying before is we originally were saying when you're asymptomatic from COVID-19, you're good to go. But
yes.
even the earliest research is showing 1 to 4 weeks after you're asymptomatic, you recover, you can actually still be shedding virus. So then when I hear your family's story, because Jill and I were pretty sure we had it in early February and Talia wasn't sick. But from the fever perspective, I remember last fall, our daughter Talia had acute babesiosis and she had 2 weeks of fever and she never went below like 101. I mean, 101 up to 105. And we would only give her some ibuprofen when she was uncomfortable. So the two questions I think would be really helpful for people to, because I know you've sort of touched on it, but when would you use a fever reducer if you would at all? And then if so, which one might you consider, in COVID-19?
Okay, so Such great questions. I actually have an ebook that I'll put the link to in case anybody wants it. It was the first book I
I
wrote.
think we all want it.
I mean, it's just a really short ebook, but it was the very first one I'd ever written about fever, right? The top mistakes parents make when kids have a fever, and what you can do instead. And the reason I wrote this was because of the fact that fever phobia is such a problem. And it's not just among parents, right? It's among practitioners too. I mean, the first thing that happens if you go to urgent care, the ER, when your kid has a fever, even before anyone looks at your kid or lays hands on your kids, is your kid will get a dose of Tylenol. And, we need to really move away from that. And so, okay, so I just put in the link to the ebook there. And
so I got to tell you a quick story because I want to see if you did the same thing. When I was a resident, I would not write standing orders for Tylenol or ibuprofen.
yeah,
And I would get woken up all night long. And somebody would ask me, they'd be like, so and so in room number 3, has a fever. I'm like, well, how are they feeling? And they're like, well, they're sleeping. I'm
yeah.
like, well, then why am I not sleeping? But it's just like we're so ingrained to treat a number and rather than the person in front of us. So
Yes, yes.
yeah.
That's so true in everything. Even for us as integrated functional medicine doctors, it's so important to look at your patient, not just look at the labs, right? Really, really important. But okay, so the question, when might I give a fever reducer? Well, I would typically recommend giving a fever reducer if your child is so uncomfortable that they can't fall asleep, because we know the power of sleep to heal. Or if they're so uncomfortable that they just don't want to drink, because dehydration makes everything worse, right? But you don't have to necessarily get your kid's fever down to normal. It's just comfortable enough to sleep, and comfortable enough to drink adequately. But that being said, I mean, there's so many, from an integrative natural medicine standpoint, there's so many great, homeopathic remedies, acupressure points that I teach parents, essential oils, different herbs that can be really beneficial in not suppressing the fever, right? We don't want to suppress the fever. What we want to do is help your child's immune system compress the time until they get well, right? So they get better faster, but we're using your body's natural reserves. And so there are a lot, and that's what I do. I mean, that's what I teach in the course you mentioned, the Everyday Holistic Pediatrics courses.
Right.
Give parents those tools, but in the ebook, you'll have some tools, right?
Well, in your blog, don't you talk about with the ibuprofen when you talk about that and
Yes.
ACE too, you talk
So
about the acupressure points.
yeah, so the acupressure point, one of the acupressure points that's so powerful when our kids are sick and have fevers is large intestine 4. Okay, so this is the point here in the web space between your thumb and your index finger, that kind of meaty, fleshy part, right? You just massage and rub, really vigorously. If your kids have a fever and if they're sick, if any of you guys have had acupuncture, you know that some of the points that you really need the most are often the most tender. And so this
Right.
point might be tender, but you want to massage, and better yet, you can use essential oils on those acupressure points as you're massaging. So the safest one to give for kids is lavender. And lavender, for the most part, can be used what we call
To
neat,
calm the
right?
parents down?
Yeah, well, that too, right? That too. I mean, like I said, you can't underscore the power of reducing your anxiety as a parent to reduce your child's anxiety and help them get better faster, right?
Right.
Especially for moms. I mean, I'm not discounting the dads out there, but the bond between the mother and child, right? I mean,
It's
there's
different.
nothing like it, and that your kids will feel, everything, that you're doing. And so, if you're allergic to lavender, there's a question there. Now, I do use peppermint, to cool the body down, but you need to dilute it, and you want to make sure if your kids are very, very little that you just exercise caution with it. But for the most part, it's very safe.
Yeah.
So that's one point to use as for fever. And then in terms of which one to use, acetaminophen, which as you pointed out, is also called paracetamol if you're in other parts of
Hmm.
the world. I don't know, Americans like to do things differently, right?
We
So
have to.
acetaminophen,
Well, it's like the
Tylenol.
testing, right? We had to make our own. There were
I
tests
know, right?
available. They were
Yeah,
available. They were going to send them to us. No, we'll
I
make
know,
our own and
right?
screw it up by a whole month
Yep, yep.
and say we did a good
And
job.
and then there's ibuprofen, right?
Yes.
Ibuprofen is also the brand name here in the States is Motrin or Advil. Um, it's in a category of medications called NSAID medications, so non-steroidal anti-inflammatory drugs. Now, there was one article was in the Lancet that came out and caused a maelstrom, right? Of worry about the use of NSAID medications, ibuprofen, with COVID-19, because again, NSAID medications, like some other medications, was found to increase ACE2. And so
Right.
then there was concern, as Dr. Tom and I spoke about, that that may not necessarily be a bad thing with COVID-19, right? We just don't know. And then the French Minister of Health, posted on his Facebook page. I don't know if he posted or tweeted. I don't do Twitter. I don't know how to
Right.
tweet. So, so
Yeah.
whichever he did, but that was, I mean, it literally went viral, no pun intended, that, that in France, it seemed that some of the younger people who were having complications from COVID-19 had as a commonality NSAID use, ibuprofen use, right? Now, in looking at looking at this, and I wrote an article just on this, I really think that those concerns were voiced prematurely. So do many, many health organizations. That the recommendation to use Tylenol, I do not think is much better. And in fact, again, Tylenol depletes glutathione, our master antioxidant. Glutathione is so important to protect the lungs, really help reduce the risks of sepsis. So it's hard to say. I mean, my preferred would be to use natural medicines and not use ibuprofen
Right.
or acetaminophen. I think most would say now, just to err on the complete side of caution, if you're going to use a fever reducer, to use Tylenol. But if you do use acetaminophen, I would say, please do an Epsom salt bath, which will enhance your glutathione levels,
Hmm.
and also calm because of the magnesium in the Epsom salts, and also supplement with a little extra glutathione if you have it, and make sure you're getting in a lot of those cruciferous vegetables, right? Your kale, cabbage, broccoli, Brussels sprouts, all of those yummy, things that are going to enhance your glutathione levels.
Yeah, it's interesting because I mean, I feel like the model, I hope will start to change towards more of a functional model. But we have two things going on. One is we're trying to treat everything with some sort of silver bullet medicine and look for it. And
Yeah.
we're also we're jumping every day. I mean, this has been what, 5, 6 weeks, and every day there's a new,
Yes.
it's good, it's bad, it's good, it's bad. And one day, use chloroquine. Well, the next day they've decided how it's causing the low oxygen, the hypoxemia, or it's treating it. But the
Yeah.
problem is
Yeah.
that what they decided happens, chloroquine causes as well as fixes. So we're not even thinking. And someone made a comment about how when you're in the moment, your brain kind of gets a bit overwhelmed, And Talia
Yes.
said in the beginning of this, she said, Daddy, everybody needs to remain calm because when your brain is going crazy, you can't think rationally or scientifically.
Yeah. I
It's so
want to
important.
also point out, just as far as the ibuprofen issue, Sharon writes, I was told to give my son during Motrin during a flare. So this is also another concern
Oh,
that I
so
have,
key.
with our PANDAS kids. They often, ibuprofen can be a lifeline for them when they're flaring, right? Or naproxen or whatever NSAID medication, they're on. And the recommendation now is not to stop your medications. If you're on an NSAID medication, let's say if you have rheumatoid arthritis, not to stop, while if that's something that you need therapeutically. So, I would, definitely confer with your doctor, but the current recommendation is not to stop that.
This is recommendation. This is like one of the few places I've seen agreement. This is like recommendation across every major medical association in the globe that I've seen. I've not seen anyone say, stop your ibuprofen or stop your blood pressure medicines, which are some of the other ones implemented.
Yeah. Yeah. And, the other thing too is, what you were saying about Talia saying, we just all have to calm down. It's so true. I mean, I can say this, I'm laughing now in retrospect. I mean, last week I was not, I mean, the fear was, I mean, it was nearly paralyzing. You know, what Dr. Roseanne said way in the beginning was really, you know, we have to get our brains out of this high alert state.
Mm-hmm.
Whatever way we can, whatever tools we have. You know, we have when our brains are in the high alert state, our brains do a funny thing. You know, our brain looks for clues to confirm that we are in danger,
Mm-hmm.
right? That is so important to know about our brains and the psychology of our brains. And so when we are in the high alert state where we feel like we're in danger, that sympathetic fight or flight, we need to actively get our brains out of that state. Not only will it help you feel calm, it's going to help your immune system. It will reduce inflammation. It will increase your lung capacity. You know, so many things that are so beneficial. So, you know, I would really, and I just wanted to show people the heart math that she was talking
Oh,
about. I
right,
mean,
right,
some of the
yeah.
things, right? I have it right here, but I'll say Dr. Roseanne listed a bunch of amazing apps, Facebook for 578 breathing, the 360 breathing she was talking about. The app that Bodhi uses for square breathing is called Stop, Breathe, Think. For your older children and teenagers, there's an app called Oak, OAK, like the oak tree, which has some great breathing and mindfulness exercises that are terrific. And then Insight Timer, Dr. Nicole had mentioned Insight Timer, but Insight Timer, it's a free app. And I've told people this before, but you know, every morning I start my morning with a 5-minute breathing meditation by Megan Winkler. Just download the app and search Megan Winkler 5-minute breathing meditation. 5 minutes a day, that's all it takes. And if you set your intention to take that moment before you start your day to have those 5 minutes to breathe, it changes the tone of the entire day. I promise you. The days that I am not able to do that, well, you know what? It's not even not able to, right? Because if we don't
5
feel like
minutes.
we have 5 minutes, right? It's because we don't want to. So in the days where I feel like I'm too busy for it, it changes the day. So this is the heart math smartphone, what do you call it? An app? A
Yeah, well, the
device,
Inner
right?
Balance app is on the phone.
Yeah.
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
So this is the earpiece, right? That you just clip onto your ear, right? And it detects your heart rate. And when you connect it to your phone, it will find automatically something called the Inner Balance app, which is free to download. And the Inner Balance app, what it measures is something called your heart rate variability. And it's just like this, right? It'll find, you know, you just breathe. And when you're in that state where you have good heart rate variability, good coherence, you're in that zone, you're in that parasympathetic state, you'll be able to see a green light here. It's not going for me right now. When you're not in that state, it will be, I have a heart rate, I do. It will be red. And this is such a great way. I've had kids who are nervous to do acupuncture, pull out the heart math Inner Balance app and breathe and get into coherence and be able to do a whole session without a problem, right? It's amazing. So this is something too, because kids need that visual sometimes, right? You know, that immediate feedback. And so this is a way to do it. See, I'm green because I love talking to you, Tom.
Aww.
So green, look at that. So when you are in that coherent state, then, you know, when you're in that stress state, you know how to bring yourself back, or you can just focus on your breathing, right? And so it's called Heart Math, as Dr. Tom wrote. You can buy this. I believe it's maybe $120.
Yeah,
But
so
you know, on their website, there is an Android app, and on their website, they also have free heart math, you know, videos and tutorials to download that anyone can do, even if you don't have this device here.
and I'm glad you said that, and you reminded me. I have a very short ebook called Relax and Reboot, and the first exercise that I'll make sure everybody gets as a gift because it's so important. And it basically tells you how to do heart math without heart math machine.
Yes.
Because I know
Yes.
that there's a Bluetooth sensor. I think it's 159 or 69 bucks. That's like 149. I bought one literally 15 years ago before they had the phone version, and it still works. I mean, it's just so amazing. So, and there are cool apps out, like you said. Dr. Roseanne, thank you for posting for all the kids. And you know, one of the things that when I was talking, there's a book if you've ever watched The Secret, there's a speaker by the name of Marcy Shimoff, and she wrote a book, Happy for No Reason. And she was literally just talking about so many of the things you just talked about, Elisa. And it really is about when we're in that fight or flight place, we are looking for the negative because that's how we survived when we weren't protected like we are these days. So now we really have to extra try to get to that positive place. And we can model that for our kids. And I'm super excited for tomorrow because we're going to be talking with Dr. Darren Engels, who's been here with us, but also Tracy Gappin, who's a friend of ours from one of our groups. He's an MD who actually himself had COVID-19 and had a pretty good experience with it. I mean, he was pretty sick as well. And I'll tell you, if Jill and I turn out with the antibodies that actually have had it, it was literally, I haven't had a fever in like 30 years, and I was out. It's horrible. It was crazy. So it'll be a really fun discussion. And then talking with Joan Rosenberg and then Mary Morrissey about more about how to get through the emotional part and the mindset. I mean, it's like, it's so great that like every night, everybody, whether we're a pediatrician or we're an empowerment specialist, we're all kind of talking the same thing. The best way to support ourselves, to support our bodies, to support our children is to be in the right mindset with love and gratitude.
Yeah. And that is mindfulness and gratitude, that's a muscle that you have to exercise to be able to use it when you need it. Right? We can't just be in the stress state and be able to access that when we're in a fear state if we've never done it before. So please, I encourage you, do this with your family, your kids, make it a bedtime routine. Bodhi, when he was feeding off of my anxiety, we were able to pull out square breathing and do it because he had done it before. He knew how to do it, right? As opposed to being in this fearful place where he didn't know how to do it. He didn't know what it was, and, pushing away the app, right? So we were able to do that together. And, in terms of heart rate variability, I shared this the last time too, but the other thing that really helped Bodhi and I to be in this place where we could just calm and heal, was really repeating this loving kindness, gratitude meditation, right? That we do together, and we did it together, and I had him do it with me, when he was feeling really stressed. And it's just 4 sentences. And the first part is, we give loving kindness to ourselves. We repeat those 4 sentences to ourselves. Then we envision our family and our friends, and we extend that loving kindness to them. And then we envision our neighbors, our community, the frontline workers, whomever we want to. We think about the world and extend that loving kindness to the world. And this was found in studies, in this one study of college students, to increase heart rate variability for a sustained, prolonged period. So first, when you give loving kindness to yourself, you tell yourself, may I feel safe, may I feel happy, may I feel healthy, may I live with ease. And then you think about your friends, your family, everyone else in the world, and you repeat to yourself, may we feel safe, may we feel happy, may we feel healthy, may we live with ease. And you can do that to as many people as you want to. You can say, may you feel safe, may you feel happy, may you feel healthy, may you live with ease, to whomever you want to. But the time that we spent, I could visibly see, just even with that gratitude meditation, Bodhi relaxing and his lung capacity improving.
It's really interesting is I'm always trying, I'm sort of very much in the spiritual meditation side of things, but also I want to see the science. And when you look at meditation studies and you look at EFT and combining EFT tapping and meditation, you can actually, in as little as 7 days, see a doubling of salivary IgA levels. So while it's not the be all end all of immune, boosting, that's a pretty significant change.
Mm-hmm.
That you can, so everybody who's asking all these questions about supplements and dosing, we can make sure you get resources for those. I know a lot of us have posted them, but more importantly is the food we eat, and then breathing literally can, if you do 5 to 10 minutes a day, you can essentially double your immune function in a week. But if we
Yeah.
don't start doing it today, 7 days is never going to show up. So, we should really pick one of these really cool things that we've experienced and we think is going to work, whether it's the, Roseanne's breathing technique or the Harmony or the oak or whatever it is, and start doing it and try it out.
Yeah. And please, as Dr. Tom said, so important, just pick one thing or maybe
One
two
and do
things.
it.
You don't have to do all of these. We're not trying to add more stress by having you think, oh my gosh, I have to say my healing mantras and do the belly breathing and do the gratitude meditation. It's not about that. It's about picking one thing, maybe two things that you resonate with and that your kids resonate with, and just doing it consistently. That's what's going to matter the most.
It's so
And
critical.
not to add on one more thing, I'm not adding one more thing, but Dr. Tom mentioned the tapping. So if you guys don't know what emotional freedom technique is, EFT tapping, there is the app right now. It's the Tapping Solutions app, and Nick Ortner has created free tapping for coronavirus anxiety exercises for kids and for adults. So that's another resource. If tapping kind of calls to you, right? Then do the tapping. But tapping, it sounds I was skeptical, when I
Until you
first learned
do
about
it.
tapping, right? But it makes such a difference, right? Emotional freedom technique or
Right.
tapping, okay?
So,
And it's called Tapping Solutions is the app.
and as a reminder to everybody, we'll make sure that we get all of these and put them in the notes for the replay, including, I know that there's a great place where I can grab your 4, because I know you did a blog post on it, right? On the 4 in the mantra, but we'll make
Oh
sure we
yes, I
get your
did. Yeah,
4.
just on that. Yep, the four sentences.
So if you don't want to wait, head over to Dr. Song's, to Elisa's website and grab check out her blog for all the information, but we'll make sure we get you links to everything. Because we could talk forever about like the nuances of stuff. I know tomorrow Darren and I are gonna, Dr. Engels and I are gonna talk a little bit more about supplements and stuff that people can use. But again, seriously, I know Dr. Roseanne threw up Elisa's post, where you can go get the download. I mean, the food infographic is incredible. And again, we have to just have our children exposed to these foods so they can start seeing what they really like, and use this time like I think everybody said it, but Nicole was really saying that this is a time of silver lining, a time where we can create new habits for ourselves and our families that are going to be lifelong health practices for our kids. And when we were talking last night, Dr. Terry Walls mentioned humans have gone through this over and over and over again, throughout history, pandemics and stuff like this. But the question is, how do we, most of us are going to get through this just fine. How are we going to emerge on the other side? So take the time that we have and implement like 1 or 2 things, like Dr. Elisa was saying and everyone else tonight, and find that thing that really you and your family latch on to, and then go with it and make that a habit. Because 5 minutes a day is so much better than 1 hour every 3 months or every 3 years.
Yeah. And I think, to Dr. Nicole's point, I love that, she really points out the personal development that we should all be doing, even as adults, right? We can all learn a new skill, right? Get Rosetta Stone, learn a new language, I mean, whatever it is, right? But it's so important, and we really do need to think about, as Dr. Tom and Dr. Nicole said, life is going to keep happening, and so really taking this opportunity to sit and think for yourself, have your kids sit and think about, really what do we want our lives to look like post-COVID? There will be a post-COVID, right?
Right.
Who do we want to be post-COVID? And take this time right now to really, understand the steps to be that person or live that way. Because, I do think we have this golden opportunity to understand the power of prevention and food as medicine, and, be a healthier society in the long run.
Yeah. Dr. Elisa Song, thank you so much. I mean, the gratitude. I mean, my heart is like erupting with so much happiness and gratitude for all my friends, especially you. And I'm so happy that Bodhi and Kenzie are on the mends. And I really
Thank
love what
you.
you just closed with too, because tomorrow night, guys, Mary Morrissey, if you're not aware, I mean, literally has run 3 different 1-week World Peace Summits on behalf of the Dalai Lama, and has met with Nelson Mandela, and is really going to help us learn how to take these everything we've talked about and even go, a step further, just one more tool from a different perspective, so that we can hear things from a different place and really teach our children and teach ourselves, to create our own futures. And we're going to have all the tools from this entire mini series. So I just, so many thanks, Elisa, and to everyone else, Nicole and Roseanne, and I know that Katie and Dr. Darren were here today too, cheering us on. So thanks so much for everything. And everybody, we'll see you again tomorrow evening at 8 o'clock. One of the things I do want to make sure I say for hopefully the 10th or 20th time is you're all going to get the replay mailed to you with all the resources. And it sounds like we've copied the chat, so we'll make sure we get all that to you as well. And lots of resources coming your way. Share with your family and friends. Our goal here is to serve and to share our experiences and our expertise so that we can all get through this together, because it has been challenging. So everyone, thanks for joining us, and we'll see you again tomorrow evening.